All right, and here we are for the end of December and therefore end of 2023 Loose Ends live stream. First thing I always do is ask if you guys can hear me all right. If you can, please let me know both in the live chat, but then also, of course, in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord so that we can so that we can have multiple sources for if my audio is screwed up. All right. Everyone says it sounds good. And so let's, just the normal intro. I do this roughly every month where I let people just ask me anything. I have nothing to hide. You can ask me what my thoughts on anything, challenge me on anything. Just put your question in the live chat. If you give me a tip, it is greatly appreciated. It will go towards helping me finish building this new studio. And of course, it makes it easier for me to notice you. But then, of course, there's also patrons, which the cheapest way really to submit questions would be to just join the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon, and then you can submit questions or multiple questions ahead of time for free that I actually prepare my answer for before I do the live stream. But either way, if you're not a patron, that's fine. You put a question in the live chat. I will get to them in order, generally speaking, until we are out of questions and usually until my voice dies. But like happens with many live streams, I actually have some new information to leak on this one, and I'm actually pretty excited about it. So I'm just going to get right to the notes here. This is about the RX 7600 XT, a card that I didn't expect to be that interested in, but I actually think long term could be a very important card for AMD. So I saw that Bench Life and video cards while I was on break seem to be claiming a few things like that the card is launching January 24th. And from what I am hearing, yes, January 24th. I didn't want to mention those places though, because they, of course, talked about this while I was on holiday before I'm talking about it now. But I can say that I am told individually that January 24th is when the 7600 XT 16 gigabyte is planned to launch. And I'm also told that in terms of performance, it's not going to be that much stronger. Like, I'm told it still uses 18 gigabit per second memory. I'm told that it's going to have about a 100 megahertz clock speed boost, around 100 megahertz. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like what that would be. So, yeah, you're looking at probably a 2 to 5% performance uplift over the 7600. The defining factor of this card is that it has 16 gigabytes of VRAM. However, the most exciting thing, and you may have seen this in the thumbnail, is that I am told that they're planning to price this card between 299 and 349, with 329 actually being most likely the most expensive they would make it, and that there is a heavy chance they will actually price it at 299. Now, the reason I get excited by hearing this is I know there's a lot of people here who aren't necessarily looking to game at 4K 120 hertz, or they're fine with even, 4K 60, 1440p below 100, and they just want to crank up settings and not run out of VRAM. And I think this could kind of be the next RX 480 here. Like, this is a card that uses a small, cheap 6 nanometer die. This is a card that I double checked, I've, of course, tested cards that are around this level of performance. This is a card that, looking around, I have a link in the description if you don't believe me. Look, if you don't run out of VRAM, the RX 7600 is totally capable of doing very high refresh rate 1080p gaming with like decent, actually pretty high settings. And then in 1440p, my girlfriend has a 6600M and it does Harry Potter in 1600p, Hogwarts Legacy, at almost all ultra settings, or I guess a mix of high and ultra, and it's fine. It's at 60 hertz and 1600p, above 1440p resolution. And so something that's 20 to 30% stronger than that card that I'm seeing run Hogwarts Legacy fine 14 or 1600p 60. This is a card that, if it had enough VRAM, if it just had enough, I am sure you could be doing high settings, 1440p 120 hertz, 4K 60 with reasonable settings, not all ultra, but it can do it. This is a card that is, yeah, I mean, I think it's about as strong as a 2080. So giving it 16 gigabytes for $300, I don't think everyone wants 4K 120 or 1440p 240. I think plenty of people just want to game at 60 hertz with some of the settings turned up and not run out of VRAM. And if they price this at 299, I think it immediately invalidates the 4060 and the 4060 Ti as well. Like even the 4060 Ti. In fact, I think if you go back and listen to old broken silicons from a year ago, I think I was already saying, like, if AMD gives this thing 16 gigabytes, if they ever launch a 16 gigabyte Navi 33 card, what, the 4060 Ti is like, I don't know, 20% stronger? It's not worth it for the less VRAM. Like, everyone would just go to this in the low end slash lower mid range, I think. And so, yeah, I think it's pretty exciting. But at the same time, those that would doubt that they would do this, well, they're already selling the like 6700 XT below 350 most of the time. I would kind of argue that it kind of has to be $300, certainly $330 at most. If they did 350, I think it might still appeal to some people. It would be fair if it was 350, right? Because they would say cheaper than the 4060 Ti, double the RAM. But I really think when you consider, I mean, what there's the RX 6800 16 gigabyte. I've seen that for under 400. So this and that card's a solid like 20-30% stronger. So I think 300, 299 flat, maybe drop the price of the 7600 or let it drift down in price without announcing it to like 250. I think this is a combo that can maybe keep AMD keeping some decent lower mid-range market share for a long time. If you go on Amazon GPU bestsellers right now, you can see that oftentimes the 7900 XTX is actually the best-selling GPU, but after that, it's just a litany of discounted 30, 60, 12 gigabytes. And I think AMD is looking at that and going, we need to compete with the 30, 60, 12 gigabyte for under 300. If we offer a 16 gigabyte card that's stronger with more RAM for the same price, I think people are going to flock to it. And that's what I expect. And I expect, well, when the 6600 sells out, the 7600 will drift towards 200. And I think in a world where you have a sub $300 16 gigabyte card that can run everything fine, and then you have a sub $200 card that can run everything fine at 1080p or something, that's a world where I think low end PCs finally have really solid options here. And so that's why I'm excited about it. But yeah, so again, just to summarize, from what I'm hearing, the 7600 XT 16 gigabyte launches January 24th. It will be maybe 5% at most stronger than the 7600. It's going to be a minuscule amount. Same memory speed. Core clocks are going to be like maybe 5% faster. You're looking at low single digit performance increase, like maybe 3%, I would actually guess. And the price, though, is possibly going to be aggressive. It's going to be between 300 and 350. And a lot of people think they may actually go for 299. I think at 299, it's actually quite a winner. And all right, let's get to a couple of reader mails that I have about it submitted by patrons. Again, if you want to put a question in the live chat, get that in there now, as I am a bit sick after break. I think everyone got a cold during the holiday break, and I don't know if I'll be able to do this for 2 hours. XTX 999 writes in and says, is a 7600 XT even necessary? The lineup is pretty much set. If I was AMD, I would just focus on letting the 7700 XT come out with cheaper models around 350 to 370 and fill the non-existent void AMD is trying to slot the 7600 XT to. Unless there is an official lineup adjustment and the 7600 is going for around 190, there's no point in my opinion. No, I completely disagree. Um, you know, the 7700 XT, this was a card that was always going to be hard for AMD to position because the way I would put Navi 32 is the die AMD uses for the 7800 XT and the 7700 XT. It's a die that I'm told, and you can just do the math yourself, by the way, if you don't believe me, costs less to make than Navi 21. So it costs less to make than a 6800 XT, but it costs more to make than the 6700 XT. So when you see the 7800 XT for $500, yeah, that they're selling it for more than they did the 6700 XT, but less than they did the 6800. That's fine. That's easy to do. However, the 7700 XT at 450, it's starting to get into pretty bad margin territory, and I think the price that it's really going to be would be good at is like 399. But that's not 299. So I think there's no way around it. The 7700 XT is always going to be a kind of awkward card that's worth getting if the price drops a lot. Kind of like, honestly, the 6710 gigabyte. It's a card that if it gets 30% cheaper than the 7800 XT, or even really 20% cheaper, it's kind of a steal then. But it does have to be that much cheaper. And long term, I know they made a lot of them. I don't think it's going to be the highest volume product. They're probably going to shift as much supply of the 7800 XT as they can. and it's never going to be as cheap as the 7600 XT, which also has 16 gigabytes. So I entirely disagree. The 7700 XT is not profiting at $300, but the 7600 XT 16 gigabyte is profiting there. And yeah, I almost think they just shouldn't have made the 7700 XT. Like they should have given it 16 gigabytes and just tried to keep it closer. I don't know, but the price is already too close. So it's just an awkward card. It was always going to be an awkward card. And I think the 7600 XT kind of fills out that lower mid range better than the 7700 XT ever could because it's cheaper to manufacture. I think either you want enough performance for solid 4K, which is the 7800 XT, or you just want something that will last you a long time for the least amount of money. And I think a 16 gigabyte Navi 33 card is much more fitting that bill than the 7700 XT does. Donald Kerner writes in and he said, why would AMD release a 7600 XT when Navi 43 and 44 are only around 6 to 9 months away? Wouldn't it be easier and better for AMD to make a 16 gigabyte Navi 44, so RDNA 4 card, and release it for $329 in October? Does the release of the 7600 XT imply that Navi 43 and 44 are coming out later than we thought, perhaps implying an early 2025 launch around the time of Blackwell? Well, Blackwell is ready to launch this year. So I know that there's people online say, I'm telling you, I talked to people at Nvidia. Blackwell will launch in quarter 4 this year if Nvidia wants it to. If it doesn't, it's only Nvidia's decision. The professional cards, I'm told, will be launching then as well. I just was told that today. So no, Blackwell is ready for quarter 4 this year. RDNA 4, yeah, I don't know. That one I can't say as confidently exact. I just think there's a lot of quietness around it. I do think actually though AMD is really good at keeping leaks secret, especially in the Radeon division lately, it seems like. So either way though, I wouldn't really read into the 7600 XT versus RDNA 4 because they're just different products. And they, even if RDNA 4 was ready to launch this summer, which I don't think it will be, but even if it was able to launch this summer, it's a fundamentally different card. Navi 44 uses 4 nanometer, more expensive memory. Navi 33 is a small 6 nanometer die with cheap RAM, only 165 watts. This is a cheap card. Even after RDNA 4 comes out, I think you could see the 7600 XT 16 gigabyte being AMD's volume seller below 300. I think it can coexist with RDNA 4 for a while. Now, over time, if RDNA 4 is a huge home run, could I see some 8600 XT on 4 nanometer using a tiny die replace it? Yes, if RDNA 4 is a home run, but that won't really be ready until early. It'll be ready probably before 2025, but I'm saying they won't have like stockpiles of the cheapest version probably till next year. And even if they did, they might want to send that to laptop and pair it with Strix. 7600 can just live on desktop for a very long time. So no, I don't even think about RDNA 4 when it comes to this card. I could see them coexisting the same way the 6600 is coexisting with the 7600. I think this card just makes sense in a vacuum. Okay. Now, let me get to the sponsorship before I start talking about RTX 40 Super Supply, because I have some new information about that as well. But first, this live stream is sponsored, of course, by Micro Center. Right now, Micro Center is running a deal where you can get the Creality Ender 3 S1 3D printer for only $149. Please support this channel by clicking on that link in the description right now if you are watching. But additionally, they also have winter savings. There's a good link in the description as well that just shows you all the things on sale. And I looked around. They still have the 7900 XT Hellhound 20 gigabyte card for $749. So you can go get that 20 gigabyte card right now. You don't need to wait for a price drop. It's at Micro Center right now. Link in the description. Also, they have the 7800 X3D, 8 cores, V-Cache, Zen 4 for $370 with 32 gigabytes of RAM for free. If you're waiting for Zen 5, I don't. If you're waiting for a 16 core Zen 5, that makes sense to me because you want the best of the best. And you're probably not using that for gaming. But if you just want a budget, or not even budget, like the best gaming experience you can get with it not costing a ton, get the 7800 X3D at Micro Center right now with 32 gigabytes of free RAM. There's no way, right? 32 gigabytes RAM, was that like $100 worth of RAM? Like, there's no way AMD is going to price the Zen 5 8 core for like $200 because that's what it would have to cost to be better value than just buying the 7800 X3D now. And you know what? If they do price it low, you can probably then sell the 7800 X3D in like a few months for at least $200, but you still got the free RAM and you can upgrade to Zen 5. So the net gain is just there. So yeah, I would check out Micro Center below. Please click on those links in the description. Also, everything in the description stacks on top of their other sales. You know, they have a $25 off coupon as well. So, like, you can just send them a picture of your build and get $25 off on top of already getting that free RAM. Again, thanks to Micro Center for sponsoring us. Please click on those links in the description and let us get back to the information here. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about that is kind of a leak here is about RTX 40 Super Supply. All right. Oh my God, Robert Maxwell, thank you for the tip. I will feel better. I'm feeling fine. I just got a cold after Christmas, and then I got another cold after that, I think. And I've never felt bad, like horribly sick. It's just like sometimes I sneeze and have a bit of a sore throat. It's nothing serious. But thank you for the tip. That will definitely go towards getting a re-up on Dayquil. All right. So, anyways, RTX 40 Super Supply. So, one thing that I wasn't that firm about in my recent RTX 4000 Super leak that came out a couple of days ago was what's going on with supply. And just to re-summarize what I said in that leak, I communicated that a decent amount of people think that Nvidia is going to do the standard modus operandi they usually do, which is have a kind of real launch for a few hours and then constrain supply until they can get you to buy their old crap they want to get rid of before they actually send a lot of stuff. And I won't say what it was. I was sent visual proof in the past couple days that AIBs do expect some constraints on supply for the Super Series, meaning that I can't quite yet promise you how much volume will be there on day one for these cards, but that it's not limitless. And NVIDIA is intentionally holding back some supply, and they still have 4070 Ti's arriving. Have they stopped making 4070 Ti's and 4080s? Yeah, they have, especially the 4080. I think the 4080 they stopped making like 6 months ago or something from what I've heard. But it hasn't sold well. They're still shipping some of the ones that were made 6 months ago. And so they want to push AIBs to dump that onto the market when Super's launching. Will there be price cuts on this stuff? Well, I've already leaked that the 4070 non-super will get a 549 MSRP and keep selling, so that's official. But it kind of just sounds like Nvidia is going to end of life the 4080 and the 4070 Ti, but there will still be some stock left, and then kind of leave it up to everybody to drop prices. I'm still not 100% sure if they even do official price drops, but if you go to Newegg right now, actually, I'm pretty sure the 4070 Ti has been selling below MSRP for a while. Ti. Like right now, yeah, there it is for 760, 770. And I think I saw it getting really cheap on Amazon in the United States. RTX 4070 Ti. Yeah, it's been below 800 for a while. There's one for 780, 780. So I think what you're going to see is Nvidia's going to announce the Super Series. And I've heard the 4070 Super will have the best volume, but it's still going to be constrained until they see the 4070 Ti selling through well. And they're just going to let the 4070 Ti kind of like drift to 700, 730. And then for 10% more, you can get the 4070 Ti Super 16 gigabyte, which, duh, that card's going to be like 15 to 20% stronger. Of course, you would get the 4070 Ti Super for like, 10% more for 20% more performance and more VRAM, but there's not going to be a lot of them. And they're just going to hope people give up and buy like a $700 or 750 4070 Ti. And I think that's what you're going to see through January. And because the Chinese New Year's in February, that's probably what you'll see until March. So I think some of these super cards are going to get good reviews. There's going to be a lot of hype around them, but I think Nvidia is going to try to have their cake and eat it too and dump the rest of the cards nobody really wants anymore until March. And that's just what I'm there to communicate. The one card that I hear they could go hard on with volume is the 4070 Super, but I don't hear the other ones are really ready right away. Um, All right, now let us move on to the 4090D. Put down a timestamp. Right, so the 4090D, if you look up the 4090D right now, you'll see a card that is it's just a 4090. I mean, what they disabled like 5% of the cores or something. Same memory bus as the non-Chinese 4090, same memory speed. Um, Basically, this thing is a 4090 sold for 4090 prices with a slightly lower TDP and like 3% worse performance. And because of this, and because there's been some really harsh statements out of the US government, I think a lot of people are expecting, including some of my sources, for the 4090D to be uh, discontinued, to be banned by the US. But I don't know. I reached out to people at Nvidia. I reached out to a couple of my contacts in the industry, and everyone seems to think that the 4090D actually won't be banned right away necessarily. And from what I'm hearing, Nvidia is ready to respond with some 4090 double D or something if they do ban that, which is odd to me because, again, out of the US government, there are some harsh statements like, don't try to get around these sanctions and export bans. But I guess maybe Nvidia is getting a mulligan on this one. What will be interesting to see is if they can get away with the RTX what is it, A5 880 or something, because that's one I would kind of expect the US government to ban. But at least for now, they're going soft on the 4090D from what I am hearing. Um, okay, and then I think that brings us to the final thing I had in the title that I need to talk about before I get to questions. Again, if you've got any questions, make sure you put those super chats in now so that I have time to get to them before this ends. Is 7900 price drops. So, you know, from what I'm hearing, AMD is likely to do a price drop on a few of their RDNA 3 graphics cards. And if I were to guess, AMD, if I were to so like when is AMD CES? I don't know if they would do it in their AI CES. Let me see. AMD 2024. Like when is January 8th? So that's Monday. Yeah, so if I had to guess, AMD is going to do some announcements very soon, especially now that I'm leaking this info and other people have leaked similar stuff or some of the stuff I've leaked now before. Like if I was AMD, right before Nvidia does their keynote, which when is Nvidia's keynote here? I believe. Yeah, so right before, oh, that's right though. And yeah, Nvidia special address. Wait, is it 10 a.m. on Monday? So then wait a second. Is AMD's right after it? Oh, no, it's like an hour before it. That's funny. It is. It's an hour before it. So, yeah, I bet that's when AMD announces it, whether it's part of their AI presentation or not. I bet Monday morning, I'd be surprised if Monday morning AMD doesn't make all of this official and announce an aggressive 7600 XT 16 gigabytes. I don't know if you guys hear that squeaking, but Jesse is going to be taking this lamb chop away from you while I'm recording here. Sorry, my dog was being goofy. Anyways, though, recapping. So yeah, AMD is doing a special address right before Nvidia. I would suspect Monday morning they're going to preemptively announce a bunch of stuff to kind of sour Nvidia's announcement. I don't have the final pricing on the AMD end. I've of course leaked what Nvidia is planning already, but all I think AMD needs to do to really stick it to Nvidia is I've seen people say 799 for the 7900 XTX. I mean, number one, could AMD afford to do that? They could. They could afford $800 for the 7900 XTX. Um, and if they did that, I think they would really just make no one give a shit about the 4080 Super. I mean, who's going to spend 200 more dollars for a card with the same raster and a third less, like, and an AMD's card is 50% more RAM. I don't think AMD really needs to do that though. Personally, I think 849 would be enough. But if they, I guess 799 has a certain ring to it though, and that would be the same price as the 47. It would be the same price as the 4070 Ti Super. So I guess let's just put it this way. I don't think AMD really needs to go lower than $900, but they can certainly afford $800. And the real question with the 7900 XT is if they would go to 699, because that's getting into the territory where its margins are going to be impacted. I think 699 is the lowest they would want to go with the 20 gigabyte 7900 XT. Having said that, though, AMD was able to sell the 6800 XT for 650 before RAM prices went insane. But now that they're down, I guess you could see them saying, yeah, 50 more dollars for a card that costs 50 more to make. Yeah, I guess I could see it. I guess I could see it. And I think all AMD would need to do is go, this is the knockout blow. 800, 700, 500, 400, 300. Drop mic leave. $800 7900 XTX 24 gigabyte, $700 7900 XT 20 gigabyte, $500 7800 XT. I don't even think they need to drop the price on that. I think it's fine. And then 7700 XT for 400, 7600 XT 16 gigabyte for 300. And the one thing that would make me really think AMD is considering just going for broke on this is it's working, right? Over the holidays, we've seen report after report that high-end Radeon sales are up. And if you're AMD and you're looking at Nvidia actually responding, Nvidia doesn't want to respond. Nvidia wants to make as much money as possible here. I mean, they would only be doing super if they thought it was necessary. If AMD really went for a knockout blow before that, I think it would go a long ways towards building momentum for RDNA 4, because then you could say near the end of the year, they could just announce their next lineup of the 8800 XT, 8700 XT. That's even better for a lower price, and there'd be a lot of goodwill built. So we'll see. Again, knockout is 800, 700, 500, 400, 300. Although I don't think it's necessary for AMD to go any lower than 900, 750, and 500, and then like 429 and 330. So yeah, 429 and 329. That's what I think would work fine, but they could afford to do the aggressive one. And I think at least one of those cards will be aggressive, right? I think we could totally see a world where AMD is less aggressive with the 7900 XTX because it's selling so well. Maybe they just make that $900 and then they take the 7900 XT and they go, you know what, though? This one's gonna be 700 to really stick it to the 4070 Ti Super 16 gigabyte, because I do think it's 700. I get 900, you're still silly choosing a 4080 Super over 7900 XTX. But I think at $700, that's enough of an argument to the other card where AMD's like, we're $100 cheaper than the 4070 Ti Super. We have 4 gigabytes more RAM. And in all honesty, the raster is like not that different. You know, save 15%, get more memory for roughly the same performance. So I guess you put a gun up to my head, that's what I would expect is 900, 700, a slight cut on the 7700 XT, and then an aggressive 7600 XT. But we will see. At a minimum, though, I am told they are going to drop some prices. So, you know, I think the 7900 XT Hellhound on Micro Center right now, it's part of their winter sales thing, is safe at 750. You're not going to feel that burn. I think they might price match if you buy it within 30 days too, by the way, to drop some price. But I would hold off on most other things for like, I mean, don't buy something this weekend, guys. Maybe you know, if you see a 699 7900 XT, I don't think it's getting any cheaper than that. 750 is probably safe too. But on every other card there, I might actually wait for the end of next week because I think there's going to be a big shakeup from both Nvidia and AMD. And, you know, don't buy the 4080 for $1,200 before the $1,000 overclocked model comes out. Okay. So that is the things I had to get to in the title. Now let me get to some questions here. I did see that we had a tipped question that ties into the next set of subjects, so that's perfect. From Vagabond of Note writes, and it says, investors talk about Blackwell being the successor to Hopper, a data center GPU. Is this a misconception? Well, Ampere was both a data center and a gaming architecture. So no, I think it's not a misconception. Blackwell is going to be used in data center, but at least it's coming more and more clear that it's also Blackwell. The name will probably be used for their gaming cards as well. There were some sources of mine that were a little holding it close to their chest what the next gen was called, but now they're just all calling it Blackwell. So I do think it's called Blackwell for both gaming and data center. At least that's what I'm operating under the assumption of. And again, from what I'm hearing, professional Blackwell, I guess this is a new leak as well that I should probably timestamp here. Professional Blackwell is the end late next year. it's ready to go, baby. It's ready. Blackwell's ready. And mobile Blackwell launches um, early next year. So if you think about it, mobile Ampere launched early 2021 after the desktop launch in 2020. NVIDIA's fully ready to roll out Blackwell late this year then. And it just all depends on what they want to do. Now, if it was up to me, though, and I think I had a reader mail question about this. Yes, Compressed Earth Blocks writes in and says, Tom, what does high end Blackwell look like if we're only getting Navi 43 and 44 Max out of AMD next year? Say those are totally at 7900 XT and XTX performance. Why would NVIDIA even try in the high end since 8103 and 102 would be more than enough still? Wouldn't it make more sense to divert these dies in production to higher margin segments? Well, the short answer is possibly, but you do have to consider this. Some of the high end Blackwell stuff may be more cost effective, profit wise, to performance than what they have with Lovelace, right? But that might not be true in the low end. So if you ask me, by the way, what would I do if I was NVIDIA with Blackwell and AMD is stopping at like 4080 performance next gen? In other words, not really raising performance over their current generation, but it's going to be a lot cheaper and more efficient with better ray tracing. If I was NVIDIA, I would probably just launch the 5090 next year and then go home. I mean, why not? Launch something that I hear is, you know, probably 50% at least stronger than the 4090, or at least around 50% stronger than the 4090 with killer ray tracing, better efficiency. My suspicion is they'll still give it a 450 watt TDP because they just want that to be the high end standard. And it'll be an even more tame 450. That's my guess, right? Because I think it's going to be a similar monolithic die to the 4090s. And I think it's on 3 nanometer, though, meaning it'll probably just be like a similar die size. There's no need to push it super hard. So I think they're just going to make a 450 watt card that is super efficient and capped frame rates. And, if it's 50% stronger than the 4090, that puts NVIDIA almost double the performance of whatever AMD's 8800 XT will be. Now, look, AMD's 8800 XT might be $500, but so what? You've over double the performance. I would just launch that for like $2,000 and leave. Like, people have stated they clearly will pay up to $2,000 for the best gaming card. So whatever you decided to do, if you're NVIDIA, 1800, whatever, 1800 maybe to 2000. And then I wouldn't launch anything in the mid range until like it was totally economical to do so, because you just don't need to. I would just price cut Lovelace. So I think that's the type of thing, the type of decisions that NVIDIA is considering doing right now. And the only thing that would make them accelerate the launch of more of Lovelace earlier, more Blackwell earlier than the 5090, is if RDNA 4 is like crazy good and Lovelace is just not doing well and they've already cut production. But if they have a bunch of oversupply, they might as well just sell through Lovelace and only launch the 5090. That is my opinion on that one. All right, let me see. I see we have some other questions here. How to beat bots and buy a super card. No micro center near me. I think super is probably going to be hard to get for the first month, though. Nicholas Cascio, thanks for writing, or thanks for the tip. Because I just think it's going to be supply constrained. And if you can't get a $600 4070 super, crazy idea. Might I suggest just getting a 7800 XT, because the 4070 super will cost 20% more, have less VRAM, and be only 10% stronger. So you're paying a 20% premium for like 10% more performance and less RAM. I don't see why you wouldn't just still get the 7800 XT. I think the biggest threat to the 7800 XT is if the 4070 ever got closer to $500, actually. I don't think super is going to be. I think the 4070 Ti super is going to be hard to get. But again, if AMD is aggressive, like if the 7900 XT is $700, it has more RAM than the 4070 Ti super. It's like 10% weaker, but you're saving 15% money and getting more RAM. I don't see it as a loss to just get that. All right, so we have an APU question here, so I will save that for a second and try to get through the rest of these. Yeah, let's get through the rest of these RDNA 4 and Blackwell questions. KJM015 writes in and says, Happy New Year, Tom. Happy New Year. With Addo Lovelace, we saw a significant downgrade in hardware allocation for each tier of product over Ampere, i.e., the RTX 3080 used a 102 die, but 4080 used a 103 die. Yes, but also, I mean, the 2080 and 1080 used a 104 die, and you guys bought that up. So let's the 3080 is the exception. Like ever since the 680, Nvidia has been trying to get you guys to pay over well, I mean, over $500 back then for the 680 of the same die size, by the way, is the 4070 and 4070 Ti. And they were going to call it the 4080 12 gigabytes. So this really isn't new out of Nvidia. You adjust for inflation. They've been trying to get away with this for a long time. But I digress. He says this is on top of other hardware cutbacks like reduced VRAM, limiting the bus interface of PCIe times 8 on some cards like the 4060 Ti. Do you think this trend will continue for Blackwell? I think you're going to continue to see some skimping on the bottom cards. I'm going to just guess the RTX 550 Ti is 8 gigabytes. I'm going to guess it is, all honesty. And I think that it'll probably have times 8 PCIe. But otherwise, I suspect they're going to up the amount of VRAM in some of their cards next generation. And so, in other words, is it going to be like Pascal where they actually, for once, like the only generation in NVIDIA's history, they actually gave you enough VRAM? No, but I think you're going to see them be a little less stingy next gen with Blackwell. That's my suspicion. And to be honest, what I've heard is they wanted to give the 40, 60, 12 gigabytes over a 128-bit bus, but they just didn't have the higher density chips on the market yet. So that's another reason why, if I was NVIDIA, I would just launch the 5090 next year, and wait for better memory. Like I've said that to people at Nvidia for a while now. Like they're like, we may still have to launch the 5060 with 8 gigabytes. I said, then don't launch it, right? Like if you don't have the high density GDDR7 ready that can go to 12 or 16 gigabytes over a 128 bus cheaply, then just wait. Launch the 5090 and wait until you can do it, because that is what I think is the smart move there. And I'm hoping that is what they do. Just price cut Lovelace and then wait to give most of their lineup enough RAM. Um, Da-da-da-da-da. Bacon House Collective writes in and says, Hi, Tom. With current information, with the 7900 XTX clearly being the top performing AMD card after RDNA 4 is released, or with faster memory and limitless power draw, will the top mid range RDNA 4 trade blows with the 7900 XT? What does your answer mean for XTX pricing? So, I mean, I don't know the die size yet, but I mean, I think the 8800 XT or 8700 XT, whatever AMD ends up calling it. Let me write down a timestamp for this one because it's a different subject. Here, XTX pricing after RDNA 4. Like, yeah, RDNA 4 is going to cost less to make for the same performance, I'm pretty sure. So, well, I'm definitely sure actually. So, I think the 8800 XT or 8700 XT, whatever they call it, is going to be probably a 16 gigabyte card that trades blows with a 4080. From that perspective, they have no need to make the 7900 XTX anymore. Like, why? Why make this card that costs like 550 or 650 to make, or somewhere between there? I'm pretty sure for the bomb cost. Like, why make that if you have this card selling profitably for $500? Yeah, I know the other one is 24 gigabytes, but who cares? This one's just better in like every way besides that. Um, I think, it's going to be like the Radeon 7 in the 5700 XT. Once the 5700 XT, AMD didn't regret having the Radeon 7. It was still there with professional features, 16 gigabytes of RAM for those who want it, but they were done making it, right? They don't need it anymore. And I think you're going to see them do the same thing with the 7900 XTX. And again, in terms of like performance, I'm just telling you, everyone I talk to, my best sources say AMD is targeting 4080 performance with top RDNA 4 right now. So, I mean, I take that to mean that if things go wrong, you're looking at 7900 XT performance. If things go well, maybe it kills the 4080 Super, but no matter what, that's the tier they're aiming for. Jesse's freaking out over here. Dig Wiggler writes in and says, now that we've seen most of the RDNA 3 lineup, do you think it was a mistake that AMD went for chiplets this generation? I wonder that if AMD had just built a regular monolithic chip, they might have hit the performance goals they had wanted due to reduced complexity. I don't think they would have actually. I think maybe, it would have been more efficient and maybe it would have launched a month sooner with less bugs. Maybe it would have been 10% better for the golden samples. But you have to remember that what AMD did with the 7900 XTX allow them to only have a 300 millimeter square die for the graphics portion. That allows for like pretty dang good binning and yields. Like the second you get to 400, there's a huge drop off in yields. It's not bad. TSMC has good yields, but you're getting really good yields at 300 millimeters squared and lower. So I think more so a monolithic RDNA 3 generation, it would have been like 20% less energy, 5% stronger, and cost a little more. I don't know. I don't know that that's really, and it probably would have come out sooner with less bugs, but it's too soon to say if it was a mistake, right? If they give up on chiplet GPUs for 3 years or something, and like on the next one uses a similar design and it's a disaster, then I think you can say maybe it was a mistake. But we're not going to know until RDNA 6 is out, because if RDNA 5 is a banger that builds on RDNA 4, I mean, on both, but on RDNA 3's chiplet idea, then they're going to go, no, that wasn't a mistake. It was a stepping stone. It was Zen 1, which wasn't perfect, but it was cheaper than the competition with similar features, and it allowed us to get to Zen 2. And no matter what happens, it's all going to be shoulda, coulda, woulda. Like we can play this game. We don't know. Like if AMD would have gone with a monolithic design on 5 nanometer, like what if they would have had a pricing issue against Lovelace? Like what if they would have only been a little cheaper, not a lot cheaper? What if there would have been supply constraints? Probably not, but it's all shoulda, coulda, woulda, and it won't be for years until we can look back and go, it seemed like it turned out well, or go, yeah, probably a mistake. All right, let me move on to I guess let me get to this question too before I get to the APU questions really quick. So Woody Chang writes in from the Patreon, and he says, how optimistic is Intel about the possibility of getting any kind of Battlemage product or tile out this year, meaning 2024? Well, getting any kind of product out would be great. Would it be in striking distance of AMD's iGPUs? Would that be enough for positive buzz, or is this more of getting anything out to make their shareholders less pissed than they already are? Well, I think there really is a lot of it, and Intel really needs to get out of this cycle of being behind, then overcompensating by overhyping things to make shareholders happy, but then overhyping so much that they can never live up to expectations. So Intel's got to get out of that cycle. But until they do, yeah, I think they have a lot of pressure to launch Battlemage, because if a Battlemage doesn't come out this year, then investors can just go, again, nothing you say is launching on time. And outside of that, all I can say is what I hear from within Intel is Battlemage has a lot of problems. It'll be lucky if it comes out quarter 4 or 3 this year. And nobody seems that confident. And a lot of people think it might not even come to desktop. In other words, what I leaked about my effectively canceled thing years ago is it all sounds true. There will be something called Battlemage. I said that in my effectively canceled leak. There will be something, but it doesn't sound confirmed it's coming to desktop. And if it does, I can't promise you it's going to really work well or have a lot of volume or really compete well in any segment. So I think if I were to advise Intel, by the way, I would say just accept reality and sell this thing to laptop only. Focus on getting the Battlemage tile on Arrow Lake. Focus on having good drivers and just launch 1 or 2 dies that you use in laptop. When the drivers are perfect, then maybe do a limited edition on desktop. But you've got to stop trying to compete with AMD and Nvidia. It's something you clearly can't do until you're ready to make a good impression. Because, man, I mean, David does tech stuff, as usual, was on for the Christmas episode this year, and I asked him what he was expecting out of Battlemage, and he said, "Oh, as far as I'm concerned, Intel graphics don't exist." And I mean, the damage they've done to their brand, it really cannot be overstated. And what they've got to focus on is not doing that again. Stay quiet, put your head down, Intel, do the work, make a Battle Mage tile, make a Celestial tile for Arrow Lake and Panther Lake, you know, launch a couple cards to laptop to keep the driver development going, and do not do a big launch on desktop until you're ready to just put a good foot forward, because and it's even a benefit to wait, because the longer you wait to try to do that, the more people will probably look at Alchemist with rose tinted glasses. Let them get their glasses tinted, get the drivers working, and do not rush this out. But of course, they also don't want to fail to do something they told investors they would do, and that continues, I think, to make them make mistakes. Admit you're behind schedule. Don't launch something before it's ready. Investors in the long run will prefer that over a disaster. Which I guess, let me just get through this question here too. I think I had, yeah, Chris Risk writes in and he says, apart from CPUs and GPUs, is there anything in part? No, wait, no, wait, not that person. I think I had a Meteor like question here somewhere though. Oh, where is it? Let's see. Yeah, so Compressed Earth Blocks writes in and says, Tom, what is the single most important lesson that Intel should take away from Meteor Lake in your opinion? Um, I think, and I've already kind of said it, the biggest lesson Intel needs to learn from Meteor Lake is, and I put this together with Emerald Rapids, is people seem pleasantly surprised by Emerald Rapids. People are hating on Meteor Lake. So the lesson to be learned is the reason Emerald Rapids, despite not really being that competitive with AMD's latest stuff, let alone Zen 5 coming out, is they didn't have overhyped expectations. And the fact that Emerald Rapids is kind of catching up to Genoa in some metrics makes people go, oh, wow, we didn't expect that. Seems like Intel's getting on track. The problem is Intel hyped up Meteor Lake for like the past 3 years. And we're like, oh, we're powering it on in 2021. Didn't even launch for another 2 years, over 2 years, actually. And there was all this hype. This is the future of Intel. This is everything. And then it comes out and it's like trading blows with really like a 3-year-old architecture. So like the lesson Intel needs to learn from Meteor Lake is stop hyping things up, stop building up this expectation, let your products do the talking. And if you don't overhype things, people will be pleasantly surprised. Like I honestly think most of the time they will be, especially because everyone just seems to be hating on Intel lately. If you don't overhype it, I think people have low expectations and say good things about it. Besides that, I think also Intel needs to learn that you can't do everything with tiles. I think they're already realizing that. Emerald Rapids uses less tiles than Sapphire Rapids. Like you look at Meteor Lake, I don't know why it has so many tiles. That has to be contributing to its inefficiency. Like, I think Intel looked at tiles and said, this is a way to have flexibility so we can swap out nodes whenever we want. And they forgot that it makes it less efficient. And that's why AMD uses as few tiles as possible, right? Still only 3. And they will go to more or a different design when they can use 3D stacking to make it better, but only when it's ready. They're not just going to say, we're just going to make everything a tile that's like 50 millimeters squared for some bizarre reason. That's really small. It's needless packaging costs. If we're being honest, Meteor Lake should probably just be 2 tiles. And I think that's the other lesson Intel needs to learn is tiles aren't just about getting around node issues. It's also an economics thing if you do it right. So yeah, that's the things I think Intel could learn from Meteor Lake. And now I want to get to some Strix questions here. Let me put down a timestamp. Bfish writes in and says, what, if anything, are you looking forward to in 2024? What are you most excited about? Strix. It's just that simple. Zen 5 Strix. I mean, are you kidding me here? Actual Windows 12 caliber AI engine inside of Strix, 12 cores and an APU, and the ability to game, well, better than a Series S, actually. It's 3050 performance, which people forget a 3050 is, about a 1070. So it's mobile 3050, so it's probably more like, a 1070 laptop edition in performance. But hey, man, that's enough for 1080p and good 1080p 60, good 1080p, probably even 1440p in some games in a 12 core APU. That's what I'm by far most excited about this year. And Joni writes in and says, do you have an estimated release date for the 8000G series processors? Do you hear that they'll be Hawk Point over Phoenix now? To be honest, I think it would be almost impossible for the 8000G series to not be a bit of both. I think, probably. Like, I'm guessing at least one of those 8000G APUs is Hawkpoint, at least one of them is Phoenix. That makes sense so that they can, like, 8000G, when AMD is putting APUs on desktop, they're just getting rid of extra yields and the worst yields. So you would want to have one of everything so that, like, if you have too much Phoenix supply for a laptop, you can just dump it onto AM5 for a profit, right? And yeah, that's so I'd assume they're going to use both. In terms of release date, I mean, you know, it's kind of been ready to go for a bit here. I think definitely this quarter. I think definitely this quarter. Wouldn't be surprised if they announced it Monday. I think we've already seen some AIBs talk about it coming out late January, right? So, I mean, this quarter. All right, so there is an APU question. Let me continue on this one with some CPU questions here quick. Yeah. So Kita Abdul Kadar writes in and says, regarding the handheld Z1 Extreme market, do you have a sense of how the industry, both OEMs like Asus, Lenovo, and Dell, and then also the people designing these things, AMD, is feeling about the handheld market at this point? Are we going to see a similar push in 2024 by Asus, AMD, Lenovo, like we saw for the Ally and Z1 Extreme? The reviews of both the Ally and Legion were good, but the sales seem to have been underwhelming. Yeah, it underperformed expectations. I was told directly by people selling the Ally that it didn't live up to the sales hype they were hoping for. And the Steam Deck, the winner for 2023. On one hand, those devices are close enough to a regular laptop that they shouldn't really require much more extra dev costs. But the market is niche, and comparing them with Valve, who is basically subsiding the deck, has to mean that the margin are pretty slim, if any. I think you're going to see most companies dabble in this, if anything, just as a learning exercise, and then maybe try again. But I mean, what MSI just announced their Meteor Lake handheld. I think you're going to continue to see companies mess with these. I would be surprised if all of them stick to it, right? It's almost feeling like VR devices in 2015, where everyone apparently had to have their own VR device, and then most of them gave up on the market. But you know, there's not going to. I don't. Yeah, I think the next Steam Deck's going to be in a couple, 2 or 3 years. So I think you still have that time where, like, right now, you're going to see companies trying. Um, let's see. Uh, duh. All right, Quick Jumper writes in and says, "Hello, Tom. If the rumors about the i9 14900KS are true, then Intel is absolutely doomed. They are not learning from their mistakes, and this product is real, then it will look very stupid compared to Zen 5. I go even so far as to call Pat stupid if he actually approved the i9 1400KS. Let me put down a timestamp here for this one. i9KS. I mean, I leaked the 6.2 gigahertz Raptor Lake refresh flagship almost a year ago. It was the first half of last year. Don't you guys remember what that, like, Raptor Lake refresh leak? I said in the title, I believe, of the video, 6.2 gigahertz. So this is true. It's been known for a while they were going to push it to 6.2 gigahertz, at least by me. And you can call it stupid, but I don't know. Intel just wants to have the best thing out they can for a month before Zen 5, or a month or two, or whatever it is, before Zen 5 launches. I kind of feel like it's a fool's errand because there's no way it keeps up with Zen 5. I mean, at best, this will be 10% faster in single threading, right, than Zen 4. And so AMD's going to at least have a 10% win in gaming, I think, over this, if not more. And yeah, I don't know. Intel just wants the highest, chart topping product they can in Zen 5 reviews. I'm gonna guess volume is gonna be very bad on the i9KS. From what I heard, volume on the 13900KS, like Intel, like, why was it sometimes or usually above MSRP? It's because Intel, like, from what I hear, Intel's yields on 10 nanometer are not great. They're not TSMC grade. The only reason they have these KS products is they're making a shit ton of Raptor Lake and then binning them. Like, the 13900 KS, from what I'm told, really was golden samples. Like, they made less than 10,000 or 20,000, which is nothing, by the way, in terms of volume for Intel. And that's all they could make total, is like less than 20,000. I would guess it's even less of that they can make for the i9 14900KS. And there is a very real reason their i5s and i7s clock lower than their i9s. They really are worse yields, and they only are able to make a limited amount of i9s. So I don't know. It is what it is. Intel's just trying to keep the crown. If you think about it, they really did fail to take the gaming crown. Like, let me look up i9 14900K review at TechSpot, because I think Intel was hoping to firmly take the gaming crown with the 14th gen, and that was just half of the reason. Even if it's only like 5% better than the previous gen, they were like, yeah, but we've got to take the crown. And if you look, I'm on TechSpot. I'll maybe add this link in the description too, after the stream is done. Yeah, I mean, the 7800X3D managed to still win. So I think the whole point of the i9 14900KS is they at least want to tie current gen gaming crowns with the 7800X3D, and they failed to do that. And that's the reason why they would continue to decide they need to launch this thing. Okay. Chris Rich writes in and says, apart from CPUs and GPUs, is there anything in particular you are hoping to see announced at CES? For myself, I'm hoping to see some nice 4K OLED monitors. Yeah, some more OLED monitor options would probably be something I'm hoping to see at CES. But honestly, you know what I want to see at CES? Actually innovative Meteor Lake, and underline this, and Hawkpoint designs. I want to see the adoption there so people have choice for good Hawkpoint designs without a dedicated graphics card, and then clear evidence that Strix is going to have those options as well. Meteor Lake, they're still pairing graphics cards with it. I'd like to see some truly innovative laptop designs that really uses both AMD and Intel options. So that's what I want to see here. All right, let me move on to. All right, this is an interesting question from a tipped one at that too. So let me switch to that. 5630 DLSS value. Okay. Ephraim Man writes in, thank you for the tip. And he says, Happy New Year's. What's the most you'd pay in difference between an AMD and Nvidia card for RT and DLSS advantages? I've seen some people say as much as $200. Well, and that seems bonkers to me. Um, I would say in the low end, I'd probably pay. It's all percentage wise, though. I'd say 20%. If it's all in a vacuum. So that means same amount of VRAM, same amount of raster, same amount of ray tracing, and same efficiency, or at least the efficiency argument's negligible. Like it's like, oh, it's 160 instead of 140 watt. Like who cares? I'd pay like 20% more at most for DLSS. So that's if everything else is the same. And so if someone were to go, well, so then you would buy a 4080 over a 7900 XTX. Well, no, usually the 7900 XTX is more than 20% cheaper. And also it has 50% more RAM. And actually, according to the latest numbers coming out, it's actually stronger in raster. It is. It's aging to be almost 10% stronger in raster, at least 5% better. So it's a stronger card with 50% more RAM that costs less than the 4080. Not worth it for the DLSS. Now, a good example though, the 4060 and the 7600. Okay, actually, I have a 4060 here that I still need to play around with a lot more. The 4060, well, same amount of RAM as a 7600, actually uses less energy. Actually, the ray tracing really isn't better than the 7600 in a lot of averages, so we can maybe throw that one out. Would I pay the extra 10% for a 4060 over a 7600? Maybe. The only reason I wouldn't is because they're both 8 gigabytes, and at a certain point, you're just going for the cheapest, and all of them are going to be hamstrung by RAM before the performance, anyways. Right? Like it's not like it's gonna run 4K, so why do you need DLSS to help you? You'll probably be fine, but I would pay the extra 10% for the 4060 over a 7600, probably. Hence why I think over time, AMD needs to push the 7600 to just replace the 6600 in its pricing, and then have a 16 gigabyte 7600. Because then, no, I'm not getting the 4060 over a 16 gigabyte 7600 XT. Same performance, one is double the RAM, worth it more than DLSS. That is my opinion on DLSS value. I do not think it's worth nothing, though. Although, again, I do think people don't give FSR enough credit, but I don't want to get into that again. All right, let's see what we got here for questions. We got through that one. All right. 60 plus FPS gamer writes in with a tip. Thank you for that. Says, I have an RTX 3070 in game at 2560 by 14, so 1440p. All right. Yeah, right. So at least you're in 1440p with that 8 GB card. Should I buy an RTX 4070 Ti Super or wait till the end of the year? Well, I wouldn't wait for the 5070 because we have no proof that's even coming out this year. Right, the 4070 Ti came out the next year, and the 4070 came out the next year for Lovelace. So I don't know why you would think the 5070 would be ready this year. It could be, but I kind of doubt it. He says I have a Ryzen 9 5900X and 64 gigabytes of DDR4 3600. Yeah, so you basically have the same PC as Dan, besides your graphics card. Um, I mean, I mean, I would wait till the end of next week to see where prices fall. Because again, would I get a 4070 Ti Super 16 gigabyte for $800? If you want the Nvidia features, maybe. But if AMD drops the 7900 XT to 700, more RAM, $100 cheaper, I might go for that. Or gasp, if they make the 7900 XTX the same price, get the 7900 XTX. So this question is hard to answer until next year. I mean, sorry, until the end of next week. But I will say this too. It's not like you're gaming in 4K. Um, like if you're just like, I wonder, is there any good deals on like a 6950? Because the 6950 XT is like the champion of 1440p. RDNA 2 is really, really good. People forget this. Like, yes, the 3090 Ti was the strongest card in 4K last gen, but it was barely out for any time before the next generation. And that was only in 4K. In 1440p, the 6950 XT used like 100 watts less. 1080p, it blew past the 3090 Ti. If you're gonna stick to 1440p, I would actually try to find like a used 6950 XT, because I'm gonna be honest with you, in 1440p, it's gonna be like 20% weaker maybe than that Nvidia card, and you could save maybe hundreds of dollars. Let me see. 6950 XT. What are we getting here on eBay? It's kind of holding its value all of a sudden. That's interesting. So I don't know. In 1440p, I do kind of feel like more than a 7800 XT is overkill. I don't know. But you want the 16 gigabytes. That's why I just wouldn't go for the 4070, any of the 12 gigabyte models of that. So yeah, I'm gonna level with you. If you're in 1440p, my honest to God recommendation, that's like $500 for a 7800 XT or 800 for a 16 gigabyte. I mean, come on, man. They're both 16 gigabyte cards, the Nvidia one and the AMD one. The Nvidia one costs $300 more. I'd say get the 7800 XT now if you can find it for MSRP, because that's just going to completely obliterate 1440p. And if you want to crush it, I mean, honestly, once you get to 4080 performance, I found like you're talking about more than a 3090 Ti. Don't forget the 7900 XT is a little stronger than a 3090 Ti. I mean, 1440p is a joke, man. I don't think you need more than that. Is actually what it comes down to for me. All right, let me continue with these questions here. All right, so let's get to some of these questions. I got timestamp for Arrow Lake and for Zen 5. Oh, make sure you hit the like button right now. We have over 1,000 people watching. Let's get to over 1,000 likes. And also click those links in the description as well. Yeah, I really do appreciate it when you guys share. Also, double check that you're subscribed to the channel. Half of you apparently aren't. It does help the algorithm if you're subscribed. I know some people say it doesn't. It does. Please double check that you're subscribed to the channel and hit the like button. Okay. So Mr. W writes in, thank you for the tip. If Arrow Lake surprises Zen 5, can AMD respond easily? Yeah. I mean, I think so. The better way to put it for next gen Zen 5 versus Arrow Lake isn't is AMD going to be able to respond? It's is Arrow Lake going to be good enough to threaten AMD? Because AMD has proven they don't need to win the performance crown. If I go to Amazon CPU best sellers. I'll probably put this link in the description as well. If I go here, the number one selling CPU still on Amazon and I believe at Micro Center as well is the 7800X 3D. It's not the $500 7950X, the $600 7950X 3D, or wherever the prices are in your local region right now on the street. Like it's the middle. The middle of the lineup is the best seller with 8 cores and Vcache. And after that, what is it? Let's see. Zen 3, i7, Zen 3, Zen 3, a Zen 4, although some Zen 4s are picking up in sales, then Zen 3, Zen 4. So out of the top 10 bestsellers on Amazon, at least, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Half of the CPUs in the top 10 on Amazon right now are Zen 3. So what does that tell you? People don't need the best, and AMD doesn't need to like win Cinebench multi-threading. They lose by 10% or something to Raptor. Like they don't care. And if Intel takes the gaming crown by 5%, they don't care. Zen 3 is still the best seller. Not even Zen, well, besides one Zen 4 product, I guess it is though. But so that's what that tells you. The question is if Arrow Lake will be good enough that it can command a price premium because it's going to cost more to manufacture, I'm hearing, than Zen 5. And that's the question, So it's more of, will AMD surprise Intel by hitting a home run with Zen 5? And can Arrow Lake have enough of a performance lead to justify a higher price than Zen 5? Because it needs to, because it costs more to make. And just remember this. Right now, AMD is making, they said it in their earnings. This is public info. AMD is making great profits on the 7900 XTX right now. Right. So that is a card that in total silicon, I believe, is about double the silicon of a 7950X. Double the silicon of the 7950X. And they're almost selling it for what the same price, like selling it for 20% more or something. But then also keep this in mind. The shipping cost of a Zen 4 CPU is way lower than a 7900 XTX. And that's just the silicon. They don't have the board cost, the cooler. So yeah, I mean, you're talking about a product that probably costs twice as much to make and more to ship compared to a 7950X. And yet AMD can almost sell these products for a similar price. What does that tell you? If AMD wanted to, they could be selling the 7950X for $400 and have a good profit. That's the sad truth about it. And so Arrow Lake needs to win by a lot, because if it doesn't, all AMD is going to do is have a $300 8800X3D or $350. That's all they need to do. And if Intel beats that by 10%, I think Intel can justify selling their i7 for 450, their i9 for 600 or 700. But if it's a tie, AMD is going to be selling the 8800X3D for half the price than if they need to. I just don't know what Intel does about that. So can AMD easily respond? Considering the ridiculous margins they have on their CPUs and do-it-yourself right now, yeah, that's not the concern. The concern is if Intel can charge enough and by having enough performance, in my opinion. Let's see. Nick Northcutt writes in, thank you for the tip. And he says, will AMD release a card on par with the 4090 next gen? I guess there's a slim chance, but I don't think so. Would it hurt their image if their next flagship doesn't at least meet the performance of a 4090? No, because if we're being honest here, like the 4090 has such a legendary following. Jesse, you need to calm down. Come here. You're not trapped. It's fine. God. You can probably see my dog's ear as a card. Come here. Up. Jesse, you gotta come over here so they can see you. Jesse, calm down. If you think about it, the 4090 has some pretty legendary status as just having ludicrous performance more than anybody needs. I honest to God saw so many reviews, including my own review of my 4090, where I said I honestly think this is more than almost anyone really needs, and you should only get it if you want absurd performance. But it's absurd. Like, you don't really need it for almost anything in gaming if you're a reasonable person that doesn't for some reason insist on turning down everything that boosts performance and turning up everything that hurts it, even though you almost can't tell the difference or can't tell the difference. So I think the fact that the 4090 is regarded as ludicrous means that AMD won't look silly if they don't beat it next gen, as long as their card's good. I think what most people want right now is for good 4K 120, good 1440p 240 gaming to come to $500. Because right now they have the 7800 XT there and it's selling well, but that's really more of like a 4K 90 with high setting, with like ultra, not quite 4K 120. Some games it will do it, but 1440p 175 hertz graphics card. If AMD could bring 4080 performance to $500, which in my testing, the 4080 blew away 4K 120 gaming, I think that make a very big difference. And I don't think anyone's going to go, but it doesn't beat Nvidia's $2,000 thing. They're going to go, hey, enthusiast gaming is now $500. Awesome, this is the thing that most people want. All right. I think there was another question here in the tips. Let me see. All right. Soldier78 writes in and says, it's kind of off topic, but what are the tensor cores on NVIDIA making? There's no performance difference, or is there? Is the picture quality on a 4090 on a capped 1080p 60 better than an RTX 2060? Probably to a certain extent. I mean, if you cranked up the settings, 1080p 60 is enough. The 2060s, I have a 2060. It's old enough that, it's not always doing ultra and 1080p 60. So in that example, yes. Now, if you were to say 3070, well, doesn't have enough VRAM really, so it might also be a difference. But I don't know. Let's say your example was a 3080. Is there really a difference in 1080p at 60? Well, no. But if you look, 4K is becoming a very popular resolution. And tensor cores are used for some things. I am told they are used in DLSS. So, no, there is a difference. I get the point you're trying to make, but that is kind of what I was saying, which is there a difference in some? Yeah, in your scenario, there is. But do I think most people need all of the extra? No. There's a big difference between a 2060 and a 4090, even in 1080p 60. But is there a difference between a 4080 and a 4090? No. What about 1440p 60? Honestly, no. 4K 60? No. So when is there a difference between a 4080 and a 4090? It's when you're gaming at 4K above 120 hertz, right, or around there. And I think most people um, that's right where the difference starts to show. In my testing, the 4080 did, and the 7900 XTX did 4K 120 fine. So I think that's why that's the limit AMD needs to go to. But yeah, I mean the 2060 is a bit weak now, man. All right. Let me see here. All right, let me get to some more of these Patreon questions. Again, I'm probably going to do this for another 30 minutes at most. So make sure you get any final tip questions you want to get in. And now I would also suggest in the Moore's Law Said Discord in the after video chat section, which remember, you can ask free questions in the Moore's Law Said Discord right now. Just join the Patreon, which I guess I will say that too. I do want to plug that as well. Um, we Moore's Law is Dead has a higher Patreon percentage than almost anyone with this YouTube subscriber count. Over 1,000 patrons. Well, technically, depending on how you count it, over 1,300 patrons for a channel that doesn't even have 200,000 YouTube subscribers. So that's a lot. But I do want to say, if even 5% of the viewers join the Patreon for $2 a month, you're getting multiple exclusive ad-free pieces of content, and we wouldn't need advertisers. Like, I just start turning down monetization, but no matter what, I want to be able to hire more people, do more stuff, frankly, hire more people so I have a better work-life balance. So, it's going to come from somewhere, but I just think that's something to keep in the back of your head, everybody. If you join the Patreon, if even 5% of you did, we wouldn't need any advertisers. So, and that really does where the money comes from dictates how we aggressively argue with the advertisers too, because the more patrons we have, the more we tell advertisers, either you meet our requirements and you make it short, or you go away. So I just want to plug that, consider joining the Moore's Law Said Patreon. And all right, let me get to these questions. Lars Hansen writes, and he says, "Hi Tom, is 16 gigabytes of RAM max we should expect on an RDNA 4 8000 series versus the 24 on the 7900 XT?" Ooh, I actually like this question. Let me write down a timestamp for this one. 113:45 will RDNA 4 limited 16 gigabytes. Okay, and then let me also change this. All right. So the question is it silly for us to assume AMD will launch more than a 16 gigabyte card this year? I don't think it's entirely silly. I think you would be silly to bet it. Like, I'm not betting money on it because I think 16 gigabytes is almost certainly what AMD is going to target for a $500 to $600 high-end to mid-range card. However, if RDNA 4 turns out perfectly, like this is another RDNA 2 moment where they just hit a home run. I could see a 32 gigabyte model, especially if the density was there for it, because AI is a big thing. There's a lot of people right now who are saying they're buying Alchemist just for the 16 gigabytes to do AI work and to just to have extra RAM. I think there's an argument that, AMD's goal is to be around a 4080 with RDNA 4. If it turns out badly, I'd just keep it to 16 gigabytes and try to make it $500. I would say, now you're getting 7900 XT performance for 500, right? That's good, but you have 16 gigabytes. But if it turns out well, like if it turns out above expectations, like let's say they fixed RDNA and there's also a 10% performance per clock increase and they have the fastest memory available for a reasonable price. Like let's say this thing beats the 4080 Super, and therefore, that would beat the 7900 XTX by like 10% or so. If they managed that with RDNA 4, if I was AMD, I would launch a 32 gigabyte special edition. I would have there be the 8800 XT, 16 gigabyte, 4080 super performance for $600. And then I would launch a 32 gigabyte model for like 750 actually would probably be perfect, and call it the 8800 XTX or something like that. And I would just position it as, hey, it's stronger than the 4080 Super, it's stronger than the 7900 XTX, and you have more than enough RAM. That's what I would do if I was AMD. The only thing actually that would make them stop that, actually, if I think about it now, would probably be worries that they won't want to give that much RAM every time at that price point. But if they can beat the 4080 Super, I think it would behoove AMD to have at least a limited edition of the 32 gigabyte card, because I could see a lot of people buying that. Like if it's profitable at 749 with 32 gigabytes or even $800, for sure the 5090 is going to be at least 1600, and maybe it'll be like, you know it might be like 70% stronger than AMD's card, but you could see a lot of people going, yeah, Nvidia's like 80% stronger, but it costs twice as much or over twice as much, and it actually has less RAM or the same amount of RAM. Just get this 32 gigabyte card right here. But that is the only scenario. If AMD loses to the 4080 with RDNA 4, I wouldn't bother with 32 gigabytes. But I can see a narrow window where it would make sense personally. Jesse, hey, calm down. You gotta calm down, Jesse. She's getting all excited right now. All right, let me get to a question here. So Dave Schultz writes in from the Patreon. Thank you for the support. And let me change the color here to be more appropriate that this isn't AMD. He says, even though you usually don't cover monitors, it'd be interesting to know, what do you have personally? What monitors or monitor technologies are you most looking forward to in 2024? Well, so I have a Concept D, which I believe is an Acer brand. Um, or is it AOC brand? I think. Let me see. Let me just make sure I don't put my foot in my mouth. Concept D. It is, yeah, it is Acer. Okay, I remembered right. So I have a Concept D 4K 120 hertz monitor. Technically, it's one of those old ones. It's like right when 4K high refresh rate monitors started to get good. I got this 3-4 years ago or something. And it was like $800 back then. It was right after that era where you had Asus and all of these people selling those ridiculous 4K 144 hertz monitors for like 2 grand. It was like a year after that. This was $800 for 4K 144 if you use dual display port, or 120 if you just use one display port. I just use one display port, and actually I overclock the monitor to 130 hertz. I'll just use one display port, close enough in my opinion. It has some limited HDR. It has G-Sync, FreeSync. And the reason I still use it is it has really, really, really good calibrated color accuracy. And it is important for me when I'm making thumbnails. Like I might be working on the thumbnail on my side monitor here, which is a BenQ. and then I will actually move it over to this accurate monitor if I wasn't already using it and say, oh, this color should be a little different. So I'm going to keep using that until there is a really good color accurate, like this is professional grade OLED for like 240 hertz, at least for around 4K. And I'm probably going to keep using this for a little bit here. Now, the thing is, though, I wouldn't go to a higher refresh rate than my 130 hertz display here unless unless I got a new CPU, because everything I have is kind of perfectly matched. I have a 4090, I have a 5950X Zen 3 16 core, and I have a 4K 130 hertz monitor. At 130 hertz, my Zen 3 isn't holding me back, and I can just crank up settings to basically max in 4K. But the second I would want to go to a higher refresh rate, well, I wish they made a Vcache 16 core for Zen 3 on AM4, but they don't. So until I upgrade platforms, I'm gonna stick with 130 hertz though, is the thing. And in terms of what I would want to see out of a monitor, though, I have to be honest, I'd actually wish there was some 1800p 240 hertz monitors, because I do want above 1440p, but I have to admit that especially after playing on the PS5 occasionally, 1800p is close enough. I mean, it looks good. So 1800p 240 hertz to me would be interesting because it would give you that little bit of performance back to more easily hit 240 hertz with a high-end graphics card. And outside of that, maybe 5K 120 would be interesting for the resolution snobs. But I gotta say, I think 8K is just a waste of money. So I want to see more OLED this year. I would like to see more people play around with 5K 120 hertz and maybe above 1800, not 1800p 16 by 9, unless it is actually 1800p. I mean, like real 1800p 240 hertz. I wish there would be more people playing around with that personally, because I think around 4K, maybe a little higher if you're a snob, a little lower if you just want better than 1440p, but above 144 hertz is kind of the sweet spot in image quality and frame rate, I'm thinking right now. Uh, yeah, no, someone in the live chat says an 1800p monitor wouldn't be that much cheaper than a 2160p. Well, probably wouldn't because of, mass production of 4K. Exactly. But, I want above 1440p though. So let's get to something else then, man. That'd be my argument. Sorry for the sniffle. I am, of course, a little sick still. Danzin Ryu writes and it says, "Hi, Tom. I hope you had a great holiday break. I apologize if this has been asked already, but I was wondering if you could briefly talk about what your home network setup is like. What do you use to store your videos? Do you use an NAS? If so, what brand or model? What do you use for backups? If it's a complex setup or is it just something simple? Thanks for all the content over the years." Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for the support, Danzan Ryu. Honestly, my system isn't that elaborate. I've got a dedicated NVMe in there. I think I actually just upgraded it. I've got like a 7 gigabyte a second Gen 4 SSD dedicated to the Moore's Law is Dead files, and tracking and editing. So I've got that, and I think I've dedicated 1.5 terabytes to it. So I've got that for Moore's Law is Dead, and then I just have, I think it's actually right here somewhere. If I can find it. Jesse, calm down. So, I'll just take a Kingston 2 terabyte SSD, and I will just, you know, every month or so back up all of my files to this SSD. And then that's always somewhere else. So if my desktop, something happened to it, I have, at least as of a couple weeks ago, all of my recent files there. And then, just occasionally I just take a hard drive here and I will just back up to a hard drive until a 2 terabyte one that I get for like $50 is full, and then I just put that in a safe. So basically, eventually, anything that's more than like half a year old is on a hard drive in a safe somewhere. I can always go get it and check things that I have before occasionally. And then anything recent is backed up to an SSD as well. And as things fill up, I just move them over. And I have like usually I have like the last 6 months of files on my desktop, with some files that, of course, I just always have around, like tracking Patreon stuff, expenses, and all of that stuff. So, and then of course I also store things on Google Drive because there's Moore's Law is Dead as a team, so I'm sharing files with Dan, Gerard, Carbon Cry, so half of it's backed up to the cloud too. So I don't have an NAS, I don't do anything crazy, but I've never had an issue just doing this. It's pretty simple, but it is what I do. NAS, put that as a timestamp. Another Chris writes in and he says, "Hi, Tom. In the past couple of episodes, you have mentioned that SSD prices are on the rise. What is the state?" Yeah, I mean, there's another boom in storage going on right now. The time to buy a cheap SSD was the last half of last year, and now they're going up. So if you want storage, look, it's better than it was a couple years ago. But I mean, I think I got that 2 terabyte Gen 4 SSD that's almost at the limits of Gen 4 for like $90, $80 a month ago. It's crazy. So, like, this is the time to get an SSD. I think they're going to go up in price and then they'll come back down a little bit too. I also hear that China is buying up SSDs like crazy right now, almost like they're preparing for a rainy day in the next few years. Wonder what that would cause. Wonder what that would be. But, so there's some countries buying up SSDs for the future. So I think now would be the time to get an SSD if you want to get a new one in the next 2 years. Write down that pricing. All right, Shay writes in and he says, "How do Zen 4C cores compare to 4 nanometer Zen 2 PS5 Pro?" Ooh, this is a good question, and I will change the color and now do a new timestamp. Zen 2, 4 nanometer Zen 2 PS5 Pro. I also have a switch question that I'll get to in a second here. All right. So Shay is asking basically, and again, I'm not confirming this, but of course there's rumors and they seem to be that they could be accurate. I could believe it that the PS5 Pro will use a 4 nanometer variant of Zen 2 that's clocked high. How does that compare to Zen 4C? Well, I looked it up before break, or sorry, before the recording, and Zen 4C has like I think it was well, I think it was like 6.5 roughly divided by 3.8. So you're looking at like 70 to 80% more transistors than Zen 2. So if you think about that, right? So if Zen 2 goes from 7 nanometer to 4 nanometer, with that density increase, you could almost see a situation where honestly, Zen 2's density is probably maybe on 4 nanometer if they go for it, comparable to Zen 4C. And therefore, why would why would Sony not just do this with the PS5 Pro? They would be getting about Zen 4C density, kind of, maybe a little worse, but they have easy backwards compatibility. And actually, if they clock Zen 2 to 4.4 gigahertz, Zen 4C is usually 3 gigahertz or less. The performance is probably pretty similar for the density. Now, this is where everyone goes, well, then what's the point of Zen 4C? Well, obviously, though, it's a lot more efficient. It's achieving probably the same performance because of its higher IPC at a lower clock. So Zen 4C is better than Zen 2. But if backwards compatibility is an issue, I mean, what your console is going to use an extra 10 watts, 20 watts overall. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think Sony would go with Zen 2 for a reason over Zen 4C. And actually, once you put that in perspective, all of these people saying AMD's stupid for not going with Zen 4 are forgetting that Zen 4 on 4 nanometer in a console will be clocked lower than on desktop. Sony's not going to let the fucking CPU use 170 watts. That's the entire power consumption of the console. So what should Sony do? Go with, you know, 3.5 gigahertz Zen 4 or Zen 4C or a Zen 2 on 4 nanometer that probably costs the same in die space, but it has no backwards compatibility issues. They're going to go with Zen 2. That makes total sense to me. The only avenue where they go with Zen 4 is if they were going to clock it to 5 gigahertz, that uses too much energy. So I think it makes a lot of sense what they're doing, if that is what they're doing, and that's how those would compare. Okay, so I see with less cores and more. Okay, let's go to this question. Well, no, let's go to the Switch question now. Switch 2, which I do not know what colors to use for Switch 2. I guess we'll use red. We'll use green for Nvidia because that's what's in the Switch 2. So Falto writes in and he says, "Can you speak on the Switch 2? How much performance can we expect? What resolution will they target? Will it have backwards compatibility? When can we expect it to launch? Or maybe make a video rounding up everything?" I mean, maybe eventually, but I have to be honest with you. Like, I do videos when I have a script ready or information ready to go. Like, if I put out 3 Nvidia leaks, 2 AMD leaks, only 1 Intel leak, it's a combination of, I cover so many things, have so many sources that I'd rather just be accurate than insist on rushing out a leak about something that really wasn't ready. I made a few mistakes with the RDNA 3 in early last year, and I regret that. I just, you know, I'll talk about the Switch 2 when my sources are ready to talk about the Switch 2. But also, what do we really need to know? I mean, I think we know what the Switch 2 is going to be, don't we? We do. It's going to be between PS4 and PS4 Pro, Xbox Series S performance, roughly speaking. So, what more do you need to know about the Switch 2? That's what it's going to be. That means Nvidia is going to target 720p or 1080p in mobile mode. They're going to target 1440p to 4K in docked mode, but they're going to use really, really aggressive and tuned DLSS to make that happen. That's what you should expect out of the Switch 2. Something around Series S to PS4 performance, somewhere in that ballpark. So, in terms of a comparison to a gaming PC, you're looking at performance that's about, you know, it'd be weaker than a 3050. So, yeah, you'd be looking at performance between a 570 and like, I don't know, a 1650 Ti or 1660. So 1660 to 570 about. So that's kind of like 590 to 470. Let's just say RX 470 to RX 590 slash 1660 kind of like, which is a little stronger than that still, but I know. But somewhere around there. What does that mean? That means, I guess, if you really program to the metal, you could get away with 1440p with aggressive DLSS. And I think that's what they're going to go for, that or 4K and easy to run game. And for me, the question, he asked about backwards compatibility. Of course, it's going to have backwards compatibility. It has to. The big question with the Nintendo Switch 2 is this going to have 16 gigabytes of RAM? I think there's no chance they give it more than that, knowing Nintendo. But I'm worried. The last time NX Gamer was on, which I'll have to have him on again this year, he had an argument that he's like, I don't know, they might go with 8 gigabytes of RAM in the Switch 2. And if they do, that's really going to hold it back. It's just not enough. It's not enough, Nintendo. So what the Switch 2 is going to be, people. They're going to be targeting lower resolutions at 60 hertz with DLSS and mobile mode. They're going to be targeting around 1440p to 4K, but like medium settings with like aggressive DLSS and docked mode. It's not going to be as strong as the current consoles, but if they gave it 16 gigabytes of RAM, I think it could run basically all modern games. If they give it 8 gigabytes of RAM, it can't. And that would be a stupid mistake. At least 12 gigabytes is what it needs, I think, to last a long time. And that's the only question, and only Nintendo can tell us that, and I'm sure they haven't technically made that decision yet, right? They're probably thinking right now, should we go with 8 or 16 gigabytes? And I'm really hoping it's 16. All right, the Wardener writes in and says, "Can AMD sell a CPU with less cores and more AI tops?" Yes. In fact, Turin, though I heard that I leaked that Turin AI may only be for specific customers, but that's basically the idea, though, with what Turin AI is, if it comes out, is they can swap out um, AI chiplets for CPU chiplets. So at a minimum, we know they can do that in server. I see no reason why they couldn't do that with some other products if they left enough room. The biggest reason they might not be able to is if they just have the room, but I think it's plausible that if they really wanted to, they could make a Dragon Range CPU with like an 8-core Zen 5, or who knows if they'll have a 12 or 16 core chiplet eventually. And then they'll have on the side there an AI chiplet. Like, that's totally plausible. I don't really see them doing that though outside of server until Zen 6 is actually what I expect though. All right. Falto writes in and he says, GTA 5 source code has been leaked. How bad is this and what does this entail for us? A delayed GTA 6? No. Hackers can hack GTA 5 online on all platforms more easily. Well, yes, but I believe the GTA, I saw that recently was leaked again, but my understanding is the GTA 5 source code was already leaked years ago. So this has already happened. All this means is that it's easier to hack the servers, but at the same time, you know, I think there should be a wake up call to developers that they need to make their online code good enough that even if you have like the schematics to the bank, it shouldn't be easy to rob. That's just good code, right? And a lot of these developers need to start assuming that their source code will get leaked eventually, and that they need to have security that can handle that. And that, it's like the same reason the Bitcoin network has never been hacked. It's open source. So there's no secret they're hiding. Like if you want to try to hack the network, the source code's there. And that's why it's never been hacked because it's had to be bulletproof from the start or it wouldn't survive. I do think developers and frankly programmers in general need to start approaching their code that way. Assume it can be hacked because it probably will be eventually and make sure it's at least able to survive, like that. Okay. So that is all of the questions here. Again, if you're in the Moore's Laws Dead Discord in the after video chat, put in a question now. If you're in the live chat, get in your tipped live chats right now if you want to make sure I answer them. I'd say I've got about another 10 minutes of this to go. Oh, and make sure you hit the like button. There are over 1,000 of you watching. Hopefully, every one of you listening to this can just click the like really quick. It really does help out the channel. And also, click the subscribe button as well. It really does help us out a lot as well there too. All right, let me see what we have here. 8 gigabytes is a meme in 2024. Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, 8 gigabytes, honestly, I think it's a bit of both. It's kind of like 4 gigabytes 5 years ago. 8 gigabytes is enough for 1080p, and I think it will be enough for 1080p medium for the foreseeable future. But yeah, it's not enough it's not high end. Or harder because they were renting these games. They had to. That's funny. Someone's talking about how hard games were in the past. Yeah, a big reason developers made some games hard is because they were so short that if that wasn't hard, you beat it in a second. Like, what's a game? It was like, I think it was called Golden Axe. Let me look. Golden Axe. Yes. So Golden Axe was I think this is right. Let me see some more pictures here. Isn't this the side scroller, or am I thinking of something else? If it's not Golden Axe, it's something similar to that. But there was a an arcade game. It's just a side-scrolling sword fighting thing. And this was like 10 years ago. My cousin was like excited. It came to PS4 or 3 or something. And I was at his house and he's like, I bought it. Let's play this co-op. And he's like, I loved this arcade game back in the day. And we started playing it co-op. I think we beat it in like 1 hour. Like 1 hour. And then you realize, oh, yeah, these games were a lot shorter back then. That's why they had to make them hard. And the funny thing is I would encourage people to go back and test some of the games that they thought were hard. There are some games like Spyro that I went back and played, which wasn't known for being a hard game. I'm not saying it was. I blew through it. Only the last boss is hard because you have to like perfectly run through those tunnels. But like that's the other thing I will say too is people who remember games being harder. Eh, Nah, a lot of them weren't as hard as you remember. Once you grow up, you'll realize you've gotten a lot better at playing games. I will say. Having said that, yeah, some of them were very, very short, and you'd be surprised how quickly you can beat them. And I encourage people to go back and check that. Let me see here. Let's do double everything, even with Moore's Law dying. Console games. Try some NES games and tell me your feelings. I mean, they're fun. I used to play NES sometimes, Uh, it was close to 3K planned during summer. I love Spyro. Yeah, I love Spyro too. It's a great, great series. Um, One of the longest games around. Yeah, unless it was an RPG, right? But they could fit that on the disc, so that's why the RPGs were longer. The PS5 Slim is a joke. Here's hoping the Pro pushes the envelope again. Well, I'll talk about this a little bit because I do think there are some misconceptions here. Do I think the PlayStation 4 looked cooler than the PS5? I do. I think that one was a slam dunk in design. However, let me put down a timestamp because I think there's some things because if you actually listen to any interviews about the PS5, um, there's a reason that they made it the way they did. Sony made the PS5 large so that it could one be silent, and I think the awkward shape was somewhat intentional so that you couldn't shove it inside of a case. I'm not kidding. One of my friends, God, this was so long ago. This is like his apartment and 3 apartments ago. He had a PlayStation 4 and he was like, "Oh, it's just overheating sometimes." And I'm like, "Really?" And I looked at it. It was on its side in an entertainment system with the glass door shut. So it was just hot boxing in there. And the PS4 cooled well, but you really had to have nothing next to it to cool well because kind of laptop cooling basically the PS4 was. Um, and I think Sony wanted to avoid that with the PS5, especially with dynamic boost clocks. They wanted to say, let's make it a weird shape so you can't hotbox it easily. And the weird shape also kind of like forces nothing to be next to the PS5. So, as much as I agree with you that the PS4 looks cooler and, in my opinion, was a more impressive design and how compact they made it, they're not dumb. They did the design of the PS5 for those reasons. And go turn on a launch PS4, especially a launch PlayStation 4 Pro. Later, PS4 Pros were quiet as hell, but the launch PS4 Pro is pretty loud, guys. PS5 silent. So, I mean, there's a reason they've done things the way they have. And I seen the PS5 Slim for the first time at the Mall of America in Minnesota over a break. PS5 Slim, I think, is small enough. I think the PS5 was a bit too big, though. I think there could have been a better compromise. Um, but yeah, and someone says the OG Xbox was noisy. A lot of these older consoles are louder than you remember. Go find a 360, by the way. Sounds like a jet engine's taking off. And it was just a trade-off. It's like, what do you want? Do you want your console to be quiet? Okay, well then they're gonna make it bigger. Why? Because it's $500. Like I've seen the impressive micro PS5 where someone built a new chassis for it on a friend of the channel, NFC, not from Concentrate. Go look at NFC. They're friends of the channel. I've had them on the podcast multiple times. They made that slim PS5. But yeah, that's made out of components that would make the console $700-800. So if a console has to be cheap, it's gonna be big or it's gonna be loud. And they chose big this time. Why make it so ugly? Well, I think the weird shape, they were trying to kind of make it hard to block its vents. That's why it was a weird shape. You can disagree with them, but that is why they did it. Keop 901 writes in, thank you for the tip. What do you think of PC handhelds and its future? Do you think Windows will finally have an OS option dedicated to gaming? If Microsoft's smart, they would put the effort into that. Especially because they're gonna have a big AI push. They could have a real advantage over Linux here finally. I think Windows design. What color should I do for Microsoft here? I guess I'll just do green because it's kind of my Xbox. But I think the reason Microsoft is pushing out um Windows 12 so quickly after Windows 11. First of all, Windows 11 is a nothing burger. Like it's not even terrible, it's just pointless. So they know it didn't do as well as they wanted it to. It failed to put us front and center. If anyone remembers that cringy Windows 11 announcement. But with AI, I think Microsoft realizes with AI, with how closely they're working with Chat GPT, Microsoft has a real chance here to finally have an OS advantage over Apple or Linux. And so they would be stupid to not make a gaming version of the OS that can use AI and that is ready to leverage AI for future games and stuff in the background. Um, I think Microsoft would be stupid not to do that. Handheld gaming's taking off. It'd be a real asset if they had a good low level mode that you can toggle for Windows for gaming that could also Microsoft could say we're the only ones with ChatGPT built in for a while. I think they'd be stupid not to. Having said that, I mean, it's Microsoft. God knows if they'll make the right decision. you know. Um, and I think they've got to be careful here because Linux really is picking up in some popularity with gamers, and with the Steam Deck forcing developers to finally start supporting it well, they're pretty exposed. They would be smart to do that. Someone says they're just going to eat more resources with telemetry. Probably though, right? Probably they're just going to give you a horrible battery life and make Meteor Lake's little cores useless because they're wasting tons of resources anyways, taking all your data the whole time. Uh, Let me see here. Any other questions? I don't think there were any in the Moore's Laws at Discord. Uh, why are countries buying up SSDs for? Because if a war happens between the West, they want to have enough SSDs to replace failures for 10 years. Of course. For the same reason China wishes they would have bought up as many AI cards as they could have earlier. That is why they're buying up SSDs. Windows 10 is 5% faster than Windows 11, less bloat and telemetry. Yeah, I know. So that's something they've got to try to fix with Windows 12, although a lot of people aren't optimistic about that. For Chia mining. No, I don't think that. All right. Well, you know what? I got through all of the questions, so I think I'm going to call it there, everybody. Oh, one more question. Do you think Bitcoin will hit 100,000? Yeah, I do. I do. I think clearly the Bitcoin boom is going on right now. And it's I don't know if 100,000 this year, but it's starting. Yes. All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Remember, you can submit free questions for this. You can submit questions for guests. Brian Heemskirk, a developer, is coming on to talk about hardware and AI this weekend. So the next episode of Broken Silicon will be with Brian Heemskirk. He's had some of the most popular episodes, and he's a perfect person to ask anything you have about the future of hardware, the future of AI, and what's going to happen with the RDNA 4 and Blackwell. So if you want to ask him a question, I'm going to put out the reader mails right after this is done. Join the Moore's Laws at Patreon. A big goal for 2024 is upping that Patreon count, allowing us to hire more people for a better work-life balance and more exclusive content without ads. If you want more content, if you want less ads, join the Patreon. And by the way, Patreon just changed their billing, or gave me the option to change their billing, so you don't get double charged anymore. So just FYI to everybody, you don't get double charged. An ad-free version of this live stream is going to drop on the Patreon tonight. There's a lot of exclusive content there. They've made their billing system work better and charge you less. So please join the Moore's Laws at Patreon for just $2 a month even. And otherwise, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, tell your friends about us, comment below, support our sponsors, click all the links 100 times for Micro Center and check them out. And have a good weekend, everybody, and welcome to 2024.